Okay. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
We have kind of a dry meeting today. We are going over employee medical and exposure records. This is OSHA required training, so bear with me. So we're going to talk about scope and purpose of Rule WAC 296-802, specific retention periods and requirements for medical and exposure records and analysis, and the process for accessing identifiable medical information. So the rule scope, it applies to all employers who make, maintain, contract for, or have access to employee medical or exposure records, or analysis of employee medical or exposure records. All employee medical and exposure records are included, whether or not they are required by specific safety and health rules. Exposure records, quote, quote, are any records, data, or measurements of employee exposure to chemicals or physical hazards or biological monitoring results. So the rule fulfills three primary purposes: to require the retention of medical and exposure records related to employees' exposure to toxic substances or harmful physical agents, to ensure access to records by affected employees, designated representatives, and DOSH, to ensure employees are informed by their employers of their right to access records, how records are maintained, and the procedures for obtaining access. Related rules, following three slides provide information on these related rules: trade secrets, chemical hazard communication, and material safety data sheets, or MSDSs. So the chemical HAZCOM standard, I believe we talked about HAZCOM earlier this month, or last month. Requires manufacturers and importers to assess the hazards of chemicals, label the containers with hazards, and provide MSDSs. Employers must provide employees with information on the hazards of chemicals they are exposed to. SDSs, their material safety data sheets, establishes that MSDSs are a type of exposure record, and MSDSs must be retained and made available to employees, their representatives, and the department as exposure records. I think we talked about this as well. If you need SDSs, they're at the parts window in the shop, and they should be in all your truck binders as well. And then see the PFS Health and Safety Manual for our written HAZCOM plan. Other legal obligations. The requirements of this rule do not affect any other legal obligations the employer has to keep employee medical information confidential. In general, the employer contracts with the medical provider to maintain employee medical records in a confidential manner. Retention. Employee medical records must be retained for duration of employment plus 30 years. So the day you stop working here, we keep them for another 30 years after that. If a specific rule provides a different retention period, that retention period must be followed. For example, the lead rule requires that medical records be retained for at least 40 days or for the duration of employment plus 20 years, so whichever is longer on those. If an employee works less than 1 year, the medical record does not need to be retained as long as the record is provided to the employee, and the following records do not need to be kept: health insurance claims maintained separately from the medical record, and records of first aid treatment if made on-site by a non-physician and kept separately from the medical record. Exposure records must be retained for 30 years from the date they were created. If a specific rule provides a different retention period, that retention period must be followed instead. For example, arsenic rule requires that exposure records be retained for at least 40 years or for the duration of employment plus 20 years, whichever is longer. All monitoring background data does not need to be kept for more than 1 year as long as a summary of the data is kept for 30 years. Individual exposure records concerning the identity of a substance need not be kept as long as some record the identity of the substance, where and when it was used, and is kept for 30 years. Analysis of records. Analysis using medical or exposure records must be kept for at least 30 years. Okay. Employees must not be identified in any portion of release analysis that reports the contents of employee medical records, like name, social security number, or other identifying information. Informing employees about records, the following information must be provided upon employment and at least annually: where the records are located, who is responsible for the records, who to contact for access, and their rights to copy records. The information must be made accessible, but formal training is not necessary. Access. The requirements of this rule apply to both current and former employees. So, provide employees or their representatives access to their records upon request in a reasonable time, place, and manner within 15 working days of the request, and provide a copy at no cost. No nominal charge may be applied for additional copies. A physician representing the employer may restrict access to health information regarding a terminal illness or psychiatric condition if the physician believes this information could harm the employee. The physician may recommend that this information only be released to a designated employee representative. A healthcare professional maintaining employee medical records may delete the identity of a family member, personal friend, or fellow employee who has provided confidential information concerning the employee's health status. Want to provide requested exposure records for an employee's current or transfer work assignment, or in the absence of records specific to the employee. Exposure records of other employees with the same job duties or related working conditions may be provided. Written authorization for access. Going to provide designated representatives access to employee medical records when the employee provides specific written authorization. If the authorization does not contain an expiration date, it expires in 90 days, and an employee may revoke the authorization at any time. DOSH access orders. They may issue an access order when it's necessary to obtain identifiable employee medical information. The rule specifies the contents of an access order in WAC 296-802-500. An access order is not needed for records that do not contain personal identification information, to verify compliance with medical surveillance requirements of another rule, or to access records such as medical opinions or biological monitoring results when required by another rule. Record transfer and disposal. When an employer goes out of business, all records are transferred to the new employer, and if no other employer continues the business, current and former employees may access the records, and the employer must notify DOSH of intent to dispose or transfer records to DOSH when required under rule. Let's see. Question. Would the inclusion of a job title in an analysis that includes employee medical information be a breach of confidentiality? The answer is right there, so I'll just say it. It could be if there were a limited number of these positions and the title could easily be used to identify an employee or imply identification. Second question. Is post-vaccination hepatitis B antibody testing considered an exposure or a medical record? It's a medical record because it measures a physiological change. Does posting the OSHA 300 form constitute a breach of confidentiality? No, it does not. It doesn't contain personally identifiable medical information. There are a few conditions that must be posted as privacy cases and identifiers removed, like tuberculosis and HIV infection. May the employer keep an employee's tuberculin skin test record in the personnel file? No. The skin test result is confidential medical information. The employer or employer's representatives would not have access to this record with specific written authorization. There we go. There's medical records. So, we're in November now, so our safety topic is adverse weather. I haven't changed this one, but the one out in the hallway has changed. Again, this time of year, things change quickly, so make sure you're paying attention to the skies. Someone commented last week, well, you can't see the sky when it's nighttime. Okay, but know your forecast and know what's going on. Some trivia. Somebody saying something? No, okay. How many brake pads does Prairie use annually?
A lot.
Any guesses?
50,000.
No.
82,000.
No.
12,000.
Okay, are we talking brake pads or dollars?
I was thinking of that.
I'm gonna go with about 2,800.
I was actually also adding in mechanic thefts.
Yeah.
So.
So last year we used 892 brake pads.
That can't be right.
It's not.
Okay.
That's pretty right, I think.
How many?
892. What? $47 a pad, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, $47 a pad. That totals $41,924 in just brake pads for a year. Okay.
It does get used the most.
Well,
Not if you shift.
and that's not including labor.
About 18 years.
For the shop guys, if you added labor into it, it'd be $56,000 for brakes. How many transmissions do we replace annually?
50. 28.
290.
4 weeks. Really? Yeah.
31 last year. That's a third of our entire fleet. How many calls daily does dispatch take?
A lot.
200.
500. At least 200.
300 to 400 calls a day. If you average that out on a year, that's about 108,000 phone calls in a year. How many ticket corrections are made daily?
I'm gonna go low on this. 2.
2.
I got paid.
It's not 2.
I'd say at least like 15.
12.
10.
Tickets are 10.
10. Daily average is 10 a day.
Say you want to.
I was giving you guys the benefit of the doubt.
Mhm.
That's low, though.
That's low. If you average that against the year, it would be 3,600 corrections in a year.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. How many miles did Prairie drive last year?
Couple million.
1.5.
Higher.
Hold on.
2.3.
The entire
Is it-
fleet?
Is it
Because
Prairie?
I gave Street this, and he might have worded the question wrong. So if it's like double digits, then just never mind. Anyways, go.
Okay, what do you mean? What is the answer? What is the question supposed to be?
Is it 21.5?
Yeah.
So it's how many miles are on all of Prairie's equipment.
Okay,
That'd be a ridiculous amount of miles.
that's what I was thinking. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not possible. Okay, well, that one's invalid, so.
But just to answer that question, 21.5 million miles is on all of the equipment of Prairie that Prairie owns. So
This month of October, I do believe with all the leasers and all the drivers and everybody included, I think we were just around 1 million miles for 1 month. Right?
a lot of miles.
Alright. That'll do. Don't have anything for Texas. I think this is last. Okay. Is Kyle in the room or who handed this to me?
Jason handed it to you.
Jason.
Yeah.
Okay. Operations. You cannot be in the truck when transferring fluid. This should be common sense. I know the weather is getting sucky, but it is federal law. You guys have to be at your controls when product is moving.
That includes standing on the step. Do not stand on the step. Be playing with stuff in the cab. of
Yes,
truck.
your doors to your cabs should be closed while product is moving. You need to be at the controls. Make sure your tools are in good working order. That should be before you go out in the field. Make sure you guys are doing your pre-trips. Make sure you have all the equipment needed. Remember once upon a time we had a guy on his second load without an oil buying kit? You can't do that. You have to have all your equipment out there. At lacks and locations, check for puddles, leaks, drips, and clean up before you leave. That's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I need to extrapolate on that. Drain your pumps, antifreeze or methanol in the pumps to prevent freezing it up. We've talked about that a couple times now. Stay on scheduled start times. We've had that conversation a lot, so make sure you're showing up at your start times, heading out at your start times, yes?
Yep.
Don't call dispatch 2 hours before your shift for what your loads are. You want to extrapolate on that?
Got a lot of guys in the middle of the night calling midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, asking what their loads are for their day shift.
Or where the
And it happens in the afternoon, especially during the busy times, wanting to know what they've got for loads. And it's been an ongoing issue. Drives the dispatchers nuts, takes time out of their day to look everything up and explain things to you, why they've got so many phone calls coming in. So if you need to know, look on your tablet, look it up. It's real simple.
Anything else to add, fam?
just randomness of fun stuff. If you guys haven't set up your email address, you need to do that. Everything is going that way. If you didn't notice, the last 2 weeks we haven't sent out notes in Samsara because they all went through your guys' email addresses. So you need to do that. If you haven't done it, get with myself, Lizana, Robert, one of us can help you. Y'all should have your stuff. It doesn't matter if you're here in Casper, Gillette, Cheyenne, Rollins, Texas, everywhere has their email addresses now. With that, we're going to be sending out a lot of information in the next week. Open enrollment is next Tuesday, so we won't be having a specific safety meeting like this, but we are going to have 2 meetings per day, 2 meetings that day about open enrollment. And I'm going to be sending you guys all that information on your emails, so make sure you have access to that so you can get that, you know what we're doing. It's very important. There are some parts of open enrollment that are passive that'll just go through, but then other parts you actually have to re-sign up for. If you don't re-sign up for it, you won't have those benefits. So step 1, email. Step 2, check it. Okay?
I want to give a shout out to our Casper guys too for I think I had 15 of you do H2S with me yesterday, and I really appreciate working with me to renew that. Tomorrow we're in Gillette. For those of you that need to renew, can't wait to see ya. Okay, that's all I have.
Sierra,
Yes?
I got a couple of things. Make sure in the notes too, or whatever we put in the meeting, I want to make it clear the email is not optional. Make sure you have your email set up, and you're going to have to check it once a day if it's a work day. So if you're working, I'm going to assume you got the message. So make sure we're putting a little expense into this because we need a method of communication that works for everybody. Everybody had Samsara, but not everybody checked it, and it's difficult. I need to make sure that when messages go out that everybody gets it. I was in Salt Lake City last week working on some volume, and Denver at the end of the week. So working on some more potential volume in this area and some other areas. We should have a couple new wells that are coming on. I don't know, Jason, you can elaborate too, but there's some that are just producing water right now that should come on pretty good, hopefully. And then we're starting some more wells in Cheyenne. Trucks, I think really I have to give some credit to the shop. We haven't replaced the equipment like our rotation. I am meeting next weekend in Minneapolis about trucks and a rotation for replacing some trucks, and then starting a rotation in 2020 to make sure that we've got equipment. But honestly, Josh, the shop has done a great job keeping these trucks running. We haven't we've got some that are still here that are 2 years older than what we like, that we'd like to replace them after 3 years. And that was originally our plan, to get on a 3-year rotation. That way, a lot of it's under warranty, and typically just the routine maintenance of it. But we've been doing a lot, and a lot of it's been serviced out, but, for us to still be running as good as we are without replacing a lot of the trucks. Some of you guys see some new trucks out there, these Western Stars, just so you're aware. Those were trucks we already had. They were in Texas, and we brought them up here. They're only dual axles, so we can pull the smaller water tanks with them. So if anybody's wondering how come Water has new trucks, they didn't really get new trucks. I just brought some trucks up here from Texas, and we can legally pull the smaller water trailers with them. So if that answers, I haven't heard anything, but that's the explanation if anybody's wondering. We have some more trucks in Texas. We're considering putting, adding an additional axle on those and using them for crude if we need to, but also looking at, I'm trying to maybe buy local here at Kenworth versus bringing in these other ones. We're open to whatever, we'll see. I want the specs of the heavier transmission, the heavier suspension and a manual transmission. Also, I know we've had a lot of PTO problems. I think we got that stuff resolved. I don't know if there's anything on equipment that you want to add. Josh, feel free.
No, There is one thing on DVIRs, just real quick on that. Just know that Samsara, every day you guys fill out a DVIR or you do your pre-trip or post-trip, that it does post what you had put in there until it gets resolved. So there's no need to just keep putting it in there. It will show up on every DVIR every day until it does get resolved, just to help clean that up a little bit. So.
Okay, that's it. I know that everyone's concerned about volume and things like that. We lost a lot to the pipe, but we're doing everything we can to get some of it replaced. There's a lot of stuff on the horizon, and you know, it's kind of a difficult situation to be in, but we're doing fine. And if any of you have out there and see an opportunity, let us know. I'll follow up on it, whether it's crude or water. You guys are out there talking to people. If there's a need, or if they're complaining about a current caller, God knows everybody tries to take our business. So just let me know. I'll make contact with them. But I think we're good looking into the future. I mean, there's some things that I'm just, until they're confirmed, I'm not going to really talk about. But I will say I don't think there's any need for a sense of panic. And I say the same thing that I'll say it in this room, and I know that leasers listen and everything like that. I take a lot of pride that we haven't had to let people go ever, and I don't want to start now. But if there's, if it ever came to it, obviously, I want everybody to be secure here, and so, in my opinion, I don't think there's anything to panic about, but if I was a leaser, I'd make sure I'm doing a good job. That's really what it comes down to. Like Eric Smith, shining the fucking beacon of leasers. Alright.
Sweet.
Alright.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Wow.